Good evening, everyone. It looks like we are live with our live chat. We have a lot to talk about tonight, but as always, let me make sure that everything is up and running. There we go. Okay, looks like it. All right, we have a lot to talk about. Let's see. The last time we talked, the Mets were playing baseball, but they're not anymore. The Yankees are fighting for their lives tonight, and it looks like the Brewers are trying to close out the series against the Cubs. So I'll keep an eye on that while we talk about some very interesting weather. Now, I've been working on the winter forecast that I'm looking to have out around the week of October 20th. I'll give you a hard date as soon as I get done with the basic outflow of the discussion. I am working on all the premium sections. There's roughly 6 premium sections in the winter forecast, and then 3 public sections. It's all going to be on one page. I figured out the code to protect some of it, so it's pretty cool. And I'm just gonna have to work on some of the graphics to explain what is going on with this winter. But it certainly is an interesting one. And the coastal storm that we're seeing, that is more and more likely to develop, is one of the features that I think we're going to see quite a bit this winter. Now, not necessarily this specific pattern, but because we have things like a negative QBO and a negative atmospheric angular momentum, and also a very, very, very weak signal of La Nina, this will not be our last coastal storm. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be snow or rain or anything of that nature, but I can tell you this. This will not be our last coastal storm for the fall and winter, for the cold season. So before we begin, let's take a look at the tropics, shall we? Because that is where a lot of this begins, and here we are. And of course, as always, after I get done with my whole spiel, I would answer all the questions here in the live chat. And it looks like we already have quite a bit of a few questions here already popping up here in the chat room. It's good to see everyone again. And then, of course, we go to social media and pick the best questions out of there. Nobody asks how much for my backyard. Okay, come on. Okay, so here we are with the tropics. And boy, oh boy, is it interesting. We have Jerry out here, and that's pretty much it. This hurricane season has been thankfully underwhelming, unimpressive. We've had roughly 10 named storms. Oh, and by the way, winter storms are not named, no matter how many times someone tries to push it. At any rate, we have Jerry here, which is number 10. Not much following up behind it. We could have a tropical disturbance out here. We could have a disturbance out here, which is basically this here, that it could pick up some tropical characteristics. But that's pretty much about it. Maybe a tropical wave out here off the African coast coming off. And it could produce a tropical depression or possibly a storm. But that pretty much gets to my forecast number. I don't see any indication of anything rapidly exploding in terms of the season. We have passed the peak. Very interesting in terms of this is supposed to be a somewhat La Nina type influence on the weather pattern, and it's acting anything but. So, very interested to see that play out in this subtropical jet stream. Now, Jerry out here is getting ready to intensify as the shear is backing off. That's why we're seeing this explosion of convection. In fact, I think if we zoom in on this one right here, you can see the cloud tops getting much colder. The center is right about here. It's rapidly getting ready to intensify, likely become a Category 1 hurricane, possibly Category 2. It will pass through the northwest of the Lesser Antilles and actually pass to the east of Bermuda. So no impacts on the United States directly. But while this is all organizing, this feature is what we're going to really keep an eye on because this feature is going to drift towards the Bahamas. And while that is doing that, we have another disturbance diving in to the Tennessee River Valley. In fact, let's see if we could take a look at that on the water vapor satellite picture right here. Oop, there we go. Okay, so that feature's right here. So this is starting to rotate back. Almost see a little hint of a mid-level circulation there. And this is starting to dive in here. Now, remember I said anytime we have a disturbance around the Tennessee River Valley, we have to keep an eye on it. Okay. So we have this feature here diving towards the Tennessee River Valley, expected to close off. But our main event is way up here. And this is one of the reasons why I haven't been as gung ho with this coastal storm threat, because we at up to about yesterday, or really last night, we really didn't have a lot of sampling on this disturbance. Was it going to cut off? And if it does cut off, does it remain as a strong upper level feature, or does it start to fall away? And the model guys was going back and forth on this, and I'm like, you know, let's just wait and see if we get some sampling. Then we got some sampling, and now we get an idea of just how strong this disturbance is. But here is the other unknown here, is this feature here. This trough coming into the west coast. So the idea is that this dives in, interacts with this disturbance, and then this feature comes in on the back end and captures it and causes the storm to linger a little bit closer to the coast on Sunday into Monday. If this feature is kicked further east in any way, understand everything I'm about to tell you is going to get kicked to the east. It's going to be kicked out in the Atlantic. That doesn't mean we remain dry or anything of that nature, but the impacts are significantly reduced. Okay, so I just want you to understand that before we start off and look at all the model guidance and break down the features and the potential impacts and what they mean and how to read them, understand that because of this feature coming into the West Coast, as it digs and this ridge builds towards the Great Lakes, this feature, as it dives in and races against this building high pressure, if it gets nudged a little bit further east, then this whole forecast shifts east. That's how sensitive this whole forecast is, and why I continue to warn all the premium members, hey, this is high volatility here. This is a very touchy situation. But I decided to put out impact maps, at least so that we could prepare properly for this scenario evolving. So premium members, you check out the premium dashboard. We have the premium, we have the impact maps set up where to expect the heaviest rainfall and the worst impacts in one. So definitely check that out. So that's why this whole setup is a little touch and go here. But we've been seeing a pretty strong trend in the model data suggesting that, hey, this is going to happen. Likely not heavy rain all the way through Tuesday. The upper level low and the storm will feature more and more scattered precipitation. But if you have any plans on Sunday into Monday, man, you better get a really good raincoat and also a windbreaker because you're going to need it. So let's dive into the data. So, first of all, as you can see, high pressure is, should I say, cold front is off the coast. High pressure is building in. Beautiful weather conditions out there with temperatures falling off into the 50s. A few 40s are going to be showing up in just a few hours as the polar air invades. And here's our high pressure system taking control. And the reason why I am pointing this out is because this is the starting stage for our storm. The polar air builds in, our short wave starts to break off because of this feature right here, separating from the polar jet stream and setting up our environment for our storm. So here is the 500 millibar pattern setup. And again, this is the feature that we were waiting for to get sampled. And in previous guidance, there was a debate between whether or not this feature would remain a strong close upper level low or if it would just collapse. And as we've gotten closer and as we've gotten more and more data, we have seen a lot of support for this to remain intact. And it's an intense little bugger, too. I mean, it is really, really wrapped up pretty good. Now, while all that is happening, our tropical wave and our disturbance in the Tennessee River Valley begin to interact. Now, if it wasn't for this disturbance right here, and this is why it's so important in terms of timing and the intensity, if this was delayed or weaker, then this whole setup is out here. But because this dives in at 72 hours, it pulls everything back west. So this whole structure is able to develop closer to the coast because this dives in and pulls it back west like a magnet. So it dives in, and you can see how it pulls everything together and phases it into one. Now, this is a unique pattern because this is all happening under the influence of the polar jet stream. The polar jet stream is trough in the west, ridge in the east, right? So you have your trough and ridge here. This whole setup is able to evolve only because that disturbance breaks off from the polar jet stream. Otherwise, you're ending up with just a tranquil weather pattern. But this whole storm sets up a change in the entire weather pattern that I'll talk about in a moment. So if everything in this depiction, and we're below 90 hours now, so the agreement is pretty strong and it matches up very nicely here with the observations. Again, we'll go back to the water vapor satellite picture. As you can see back here, very vigorous disturbance, very clearly in place here. So there is no doubt that this is a strong disturbance. There's no uncertainty on the strength. Now it just comes down to the timing. If the timing works out, as shown on the European, the GFS, the ensemble guidance, the AI guidance, that's a lot of guidance all pointing to the same thing. So if this ends up being a little bit further east over the next 24 hours, as we see that trend, then that would be a pretty important warning sign for the upcoming cold season in terms of dealing with these coastal storms, because this tells us that the potential for a lack of sampling in some locations, like we were talking about in the spring, remember with the whole government and everything, that may be creating a more difficult setup for these forecasts. So this is a really, really important test for me personally in trying to gauge what I need to do to make sure I provide an excellent forecast for you and for my own nerves. Is where are we with the sampling? How does that impact the model guidance? And what happens when you get a disturbance that's coming out of Canada, like what we're seeing, dropping in, all right, dropping into the United States, setting up this storm threat. So this is a great test run. At least we don't have to worry about snow in terms of how well we're doing in that environment and how well we're collecting the data. So it's very, very important test run here. So while this is evolving here, we go to 850 millibars because this is where the full game of this storm is really going to evolve. Now, there's our phase, there's our storm developing. A couple of interesting features here. First of all, this ridge is just as important as this low. You might be saying, why? Okay. This ridge sets up your pressure slash height gradient from 850 millibars to the surface. So what that means is that that gradient is going to be capable of intensifying your winds and also intensifying your moisture transport. So you see this setting up here, and let's take a look at the temperatures in this setup here. And you see the 850 millibar low with this pressure gradient. Couple of things. One, slight indication of a very brief warm core low development. I do not think this is tropical. I want to make that very clear. This is primarily 99% extratropical, cold core. However, don't be surprised if this tries to develop either a warm seclusion or a warm core low, or like a subtropical low. And the reason why that's really important is that that is going to add a component in trying to nail down the wind impacts here. So we have this showing up here, and we know that it eventually goes all cold cold with this structure right here, but it's this feature right here that's very important to me. Because if we get that little warm core set up here, right here, you intensify all the winds here. Now, when we take a look at 850 millibar winds at that time period, look what we have set up here. Coming to the Jersey Shore, and really the entire northern Mid-Atlantic, at 850 millibars, some very strong winds. How strong? Let's see here. Well, when it's red, it's bad news. If I could see it, that's bad news. And that's already in the 50s and 60s. It goes above that, we're pushing into the 70 knots. So let's break this down. We have a intensifying low pressure system, falling 500 millibar heights, intensifying 850 millibar winds, driving into the coastal plain. This will drive in deep tropical moisture right into the coastal plain that has a polar slash maritime air mass in place, enhancing the condensation, enhancing the support for intense lifting. Not much in the way of convective precipitation out of this, by the way. But this all helps to create some mixing in the atmosphere. We have the mixing in the atmosphere and mixing down these winds. This means that we're going to be dealing on Sunday evening into Monday morning on the coast the potential for wind gusts to go over 50 miles per hour. I am very concerned in this scenario, regardless if it pushes further east, for coastal flooding, because we're just going to have an easterly fetch starting on Saturday and continuing all the way on through Tuesday. So I'm very concerned about the potential for, at the very least, moderate coastal flooding, especially on the Jersey Shore, portions of the Long Island Sound, southern portions of Long Island. So very concerned about that. But if this plays out with this signal, you're talking about some very powerful winds on Sunday night. That is no joke, especially if you're along the immediate coast. I would not be surprised if this produces power outages, wind damage, down trees, and not to mention, oh, by the way, while all that is happening, pretty strong moisture transport, driving tropical moisture into the atmosphere. Now, remember, we're dealing with cooler temperatures. So, when you're talking about precipitable water values pushing into this level here, that's some very heavy rainfall. And that is how you get over 2 inches of rain in some portions, especially along the Jersey Shore, down towards the Delmarva, possibly pushing into Long Island. Now, the good news here is that we have been seeing a trend of this whole storm getting kicked out east much faster. Let's see right here. So beforehand, you had the upper level low kind of spinning about, but because of the whole nature of this weather pattern, instead we're starting to get this kicked out a little bit faster. This means that as we move on through Monday and into Tuesday, you still have cloud cover. You just have scattered showers hanging around, not as much rainfall, still breezy, right? It appears to me the worst time period for this storm is going to be Sunday afternoon all the way on through Monday morning. So the Monday morning rush hour is just going to be absolutely fabulous. Um, Very heavy rainfall out of this scenario on the coastal plain. The further you get inland, the less of an impact this storm will be. But this is going to be, like I said, a very interesting test in determining just how accurate the timing of this feature is. So again, if this is delayed, let's say on Saturday afternoon, this is where it's key. If this on Saturday afternoon is not over Michigan, let's say it's over Minnesota, or let's say the UP of Michigan, then that means this is able to exit. If this exits, then this whole setup basically falls apart and you just end up with unsettled conditions, scattered showers, not that big of a deal. If this is sitting over Michigan, then you have everything lined up just right. You have this time just right to dive in here to cause a negatively tilted trough. and pull the storm right up the coast. So really, it is Saturday morning where it's basically make or break time. If you're going to see a major shift in the model guidance from what we have here, the time for that being a possibility is up to Saturday morning. If this is what you're seeing on Saturday morning, game on for the storm. Any deviation from this, and the whole setup collapses. If this ends up further east, let's say it ends up towards Lake Ontario or Western New York, right, or northwestern Pennsylvania, then it's actually too fast, and this feature tries to catch up with it. It doesn't organize as well. So you can see why I've been a little bit hesitant with advertising this. I'm gaining more confidence now, but understand if that feature's timing is off by just a little bit, boom, it all just falls apart, which is just wonderful. But I don't think that's what's going to happen at this point, based on what I'm seeing with the observations, based on what I'm seeing with the water vapor satellite picture, and what I'm seeing with these upper level winds. And zooming out here, let's take a look at the whole 250 millibar pattern. What I find striking here is that we're in mid fall, and this is amplified really impressively. Very, very much something that really has my attention. Seeing a lot of ridges building into the Arctic, a lot of disruption of the polar vortex, although very weak, very, very weak, very much the starting stage of this. We can't jump to conclusions, but man, oh man, this is one disrupted, blocky weather pattern. And the stratospheric warming is only starting. Guess that new negative QBO I've been keeping an eye on is pretty important. So that is where I'm at right now with this forecast. In terms of the latest data, waiting on the 18Z was taking some time to get in as far as the European, but here is what we have right now in this setup here. You can see the worst conditions really playing out on Sunday afternoon through Monday morning, just a mess. And then after that, scattered showers hanging around. Like, hey, you know what? We're live. Let's see if we can get some new data while we're talking, right? So let me see here. See. 2, 3, and 4. All right, let's see. This is the new 18Z European. Let's see what it does here. And we're going to break it down. Now, normally I start from top to bottom, but in this case for you guys, we're going to break down a model. In fact, this is going to be a lot of fun, and I'll take all your questions, but this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to start first, take a look at the surface solution here. There's our rainfall. There's a nice wedge. It's like a wall of rainfall right here showing up here with that jet streak. Very nice. It gets all the way up 996 millibars. And then you can see how it just gets kicked out. You see that? So now we have the surface. Now we see what's evolving here. Certainly a very stormy period. Sunday looks like a mess. We have plans. Get them done on Saturday, even with the drizzle. Better than Sunday. So when I see this, well, let's start off with the upper levels, right? We'll start off with the upper level winds. Okay. Normally, what you want to do is start off with the upper level winds and work your way down. Okay. But for your purposes, for right now, we start off with the surface and we'll work our way back. So now we go way back up into the upper atmosphere. And what do we have set up here? Well, we clearly have two jet streams here, the subtropical and the polar. There is this feature here breaking away from the polar, right? This is 48 hours out, right in the wheelhouse of you could use the European, you could use the GFS. In terms of synoptic models, this is the wheelhouse here. You should be really good on this. So this dives in here, and notice this feature right here. See this little signature right here? This is divergence and diffluence. So this tells me we have a lot of air rising and exiting. So in the upper levels, you're having a lot of air exiting out in this jet stream column right here, right? That tells me we have the potential for a lot of air rising from the surface up to the upper levels because all the air is rapidly leaving in at 250 millibars and 300 millibars. Now, again, what makes this whole scenario really, really funky is that while this is happening, typically in the winter, if you see this trough on the west coast, you are pushing it in terms of forecasting any type of major storm. But because of the cutoff nature of this upper level low, it works just right. Again, timing is key. So that's what we have here in the upper level winds. And you can see that whole setup evolving very nicely here. So the key here at this point, this leaf right here, nice little jet stream dynamics, nice divergence and diffluence spreading out. So that sets up our storm development. Let's go to our next level. We'll do 500 millibar relative velocity. This is not vertical. This is not rising air. This is within. This is a velocity within the same column, within the same pressure. And again, the 18Z guidance continues to keep this idea very much alive. Now, interesting setup here. Saturday morning, it's trended this a little bit further to the north and east. A trend to keep an eye on. Okay. But it's just enough. See, it trends it north and east initially, then drops it due south, kind of dropping it right into the trough, and that's how it catches it. But again, something to watch here. Okay. Is this a blip in the model guidance or is it a trend? We have to wait and see. All right. This is why we continue to adjust our forecast. But that is a very interesting signal here, right here. But it still drops in, pulls the storm in, phases, drops it like really impressively. And then again, it gets forced out to the east very quickly because of this whole ridge dynamic, kicking everything east. This is why the timing of this whole upper level low is very important. Now, because of this evolution of our upper level low, now we should check out 850 millibars. And there we have the setup here. Now at 850 millibars, the primary low is actually on the coast, whereas at 500 millibars, it's over the interior. So you have two different types of primary structures fighting here. And again, we'll have to see whether it picks up a little bit of the warm core signatures here. There's Jerry out here. No direct impact, but don't be surprised if it picks up some of that tropical moisture. You can see it on the water vapor satellite picture getting drawn into this whole mess, but not a direct impact. I want to make that very clear. Um, but certainly, there's your strong lifting, there's your heavy rainfall, there's your block that prevents us from moving any further north and it enhances our winds. What about the 150 millibar winds, you ask? Well, those look just as strong. Very nice. So the 18Z guidance generally goes through the same idea, but it gives us a warning sign about the timing of this shortwave. If it ends up further north and east or further north and west, if it's delayed or it's moving too fast, it will impact our forecast here. So that is the volatility that we're going to be watching for. And that is the theme that we're going to have to really, really keep an eye on. In terms of precipitation out of this, we know that the winds here are going to be rather strong. In fact, here, let me zoom in. See if I can pull this off here. Here we are. This whole environment. First of all, on Sunday, the winds increase. Look at that. Very impressive on the coast. Again, this is in knots. So let's see here. This is roughly 45 to 50 miles per hour right on the coastal plain, right over the coastal waters, right on the coast. Probably you're talking about sustained winds anywhere in the 15 to 30 mile per hour range. over away from the coast, 10 to 20 miles per hour. So all that is playing out pretty nicely. And in terms of our total precipitation in this event, well, it is going to be having the potential to be pretty impressive. So, but certainly we need the rain, right? So, a very, very tricky nor'easter. But at least now you know exactly what I'm going to be looking for as I adjust this weather pattern. And it's not about chasing models, it's not about model trends. It's about that disturbance, which we could watch and track on the water vapor now to see exactly where we're at. We use the models as a warning sign. Like basically, you got your guardrails now. Now you know exactly what we're dealing with here, what is the most important thing, and how to adjust the forecast as we move forward. For you, how do you prepare? Well, look, as I've been saying for months now, prepare now so you don't have to worry later. Hopefully, you've done that as I've suggested. I know we have. And so, if you have, I would make sure you have your batteries, your bottle of water, all that good stuff, a generator if you can. Know if you need to evacuate. I would suggest doing so when they say so. Okay, if you're on the immediate Jersey Shore, do prepare for coastal flooding. I do expect that to be a theme. So, with that, let's dive into your questions. So, Snow Boss is back, and of course, he's saying snow. Well, Snow Boss, I think there is potential for you to be very happy. I'm going to put it that way, okay? Um, I'm seeing a lot of interesting details, which I will go over when we launch the winter forecast. Um, but yeah, pretty interesting stuff starting to show up. Subtropical jet has a lot more oomph than one would expect, even with a cold neutral, much less La Nina. This pattern is kind of mixed. It has some La Nina characteristics and some El Nino characteristics. The subtropical jet stream is a little bit stronger, but it doesn't overwhelm the polar jet stream, which is a hallmark of La Nina. Um, the negative atmospheric angular momentum is a La Nina trait, which introduces the potential for more amplification, more poleward amplification, and the possibility for more colder air to be funneled into the mid levels, should I say mid latitudes. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I agree that it's not like your traditional La Nina, and it won't be this year, that is for sure. A1 Lifetime had this upper respiratory crud going around, have had it since Sunday, and it sucks conjunction. Yeah, I had this in the past. Um, in terms of upper respiratory. I know this stuff's spreading around. You know me with my infamous cough from last year. So I would say definitely get checked out to doctors. Could be you know, one of those crazy viruses running around. How will Morris County in northern New Jersey be impacted by the coastal storm and when? Okay, so the worst impacts are definitely going to be Sunday afternoon through Monday morning. You'll start seeing impacts Saturday night, let's say like 10 p.m., and you'll have lingering impacts through Tuesday. But that's really the worst time period, Sunday afternoon through Monday morning. Now, with that, I do expect on the coast, of course, coastal flooding, very heavy rainfall. I think your worst impacts are going to be to the south and east of you, though, in terms of the rainfall right now. But either way, it's just going to be a mess. I take it that if the storm is close to the coast, that it will make for some interesting football weather. Oh yeah, definitely. I actually mentioned that in the NFL forecast today. If this thing, good thing that the Eagles and the Giants play on Thursday, but definitely around like the Washington was it Commanders. They will definitely have some interesting weather impacts out of this storm, depending on the timing. If the storm ends up further east, will the pattern change still take place? That's a good point. I forgot to mention that. So let me backtrack here and let me pull up this. Here we are. Okay, so with this storm evolving here, it opens up the potential for your polar jet stream to get back involved. So in our weather pattern beforehand, with the negative PNA on the way, you'd end up with a displaced negative NAO. So we would end up with a warm end to October, and maybe like the last week, we get a little bit cooler. Now we basically shift to near normal temperatures. If this ends up further east, that means that the whole storm didn't consolidate. And so, therefore, you don't have that trigger that basically, and you can see this here on the AI, and you can see this here on the ensembles here. It doesn't allow for these below normal heights. You can see that here in the AI and the operational. And what's important here is that it locks in a negative NAO, a pseudo negative NAO. It's not textbook, but it's close. And it drives in a polar air mass sitting around the Hudson Bay right into New England and the northern mid Atlantic. If this ends up further east and weaker, then what you end up with is, and it doesn't develop as what's being shown here, this ends up being separate and just kind of goes off on its way. And the whole polar gesture just remains to the north. And the original forecast of us being above normal will lock in because you have this trough here over the west. But but if this all plays out as what we're showing right now, then we pretty much have a nice seasonable October the rest of the way. No more 80s, a lot of 50s and 60s and 70s every so often, but very nice weather. A little bit more rainfall as well. But we'll see how that plays out as well. So that's certainly something that I am watching very, very carefully. Do the Canadians not sample the atmosphere or not make sampling data available? No, they do a pretty good job, but part of what the Canadians do is help from us. And part of that factor comes into what goes on in Alaska. So, and of course, that is a direct impact from us. So the Canadians do a good job, but sometimes it's a bit lacking. And also, you need that data from the Arctic Circle. We'll still get named by the NHC. Got to get those numbers up. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it'll get named or not. I'm just saying it might pick up some tropical characteristics. We'll watch it. Yankees have a superstar pitcher in the making. Which are how are they? Oh, Blue Jays are up 2-1. I mean, the guy's pretty good. It's for sure. I'll give you that. Here at the shore in New Jersey, if we go with more than 5 high tide cycles off stiff northeast winds, it will cause major significant flooding. Agreed. I'm not sure if it will get to those 5 high tide cycles. Um, it's going to get close. And with the strength of those winds on Sunday night, I am concerned. I've been concerned for several days now. I've been saying this even when I was skeptical. I was still saying, hey, even if this remains to our south and east, you're still going to be dealing with coastal flooding. So I will say this to you, you know, I am not a hyperbolic person. I am not someone who goes out and hypes and all that stuff. If you're on the Jersey Shore, prepare now for significant coastal flooding from this storm. Prepare now and be happy if it doesn't pan out later, right? Rather than the other way around. Okay. I am liking the model is showing for snow in Canada. Yes, that is a big deal. That is part of the winter forecast, by the way. That is a very, 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 very important factor. And a lot of model guidance over the past 24 hours has really bumped up the snowfall potential in northern Canada and Siberia. Trees are full of leaves. This time of year, power outages is a major concern. Absolutely. Very concerned about that. Thankfully, we have a generator. Thank God. Because I would probably be saying, hey, we'll do coverage on this, but we might be out of power. Now, as far as coverage of this threat, on as we get closer, there is a good chance on Sunday afternoon and evening I'll have updates, perhaps some coverage. We'll see how that plays out. I will let everyone know. Drop emails. Certainly, the potential there is for a live coverage event and maybe a little bit of updates on TikTok and X and so on and so forth. So it should be a busy weekend for me. Let's check out and see what we have here on YouTube. A whole lot of stuff. Let's see what we got here. Um, let's see. What are the chances that the upcoming coastal storm impacts the northern Mid-Atlantic? Pretty good chance. Right now, I'd say it's high at this point. Yeah, excited to hear your thoughts. Let's see here. Just looking. Northwest New Jersey, early snowfall. No, I don't expect any snowfall in October at this point. Uh, let's see. Not good. Do you foresee a lot of strong upper level lows breaking away from the polar jet stream this fall and winter? Fall, yes. Winter, undecided. There's a chance that the high pressure over Quebec, New England, acting as a blocker, keeping the worst impacts to our south. There is a chance, but it's not so much due to the high pressure, but it would be due to the placement of the evolution of the negative NAO. Right now, there was some disagreement on that a couple of days ago. Right now, the synoptic pattern is locked in such that that probably won't be the case. The primary factor will be the timing of that shortwave. Yes, well, the polar vortex is having some factor. Yeah. No thunderstorms in this scenario. The atmosphere is way stable. Strong, yes. There's definitely anyone on the coast should be prepared for strong winds in this setup. This pattern is not directly related to the EPO. With this coastal storm, is this a sign for coastal storms for the winter? Not necessarily. It's the blocking is a sign of potential, but not necessarily this storm being the full that this will be the type of storm we'll see all winter. King tide now. I never heard there before. Could you explain? King tide. That's normally a scenario down in Florida. Not so much here, but it's there. It's kind of a pseudo. It's not really a king tide. It's more of the influence of the moon and how that's impacting your high tides. CFS weekly model is showing cooler temperature anomalies to end October and into mid November. Do you think that depends on these two? Yes, definitely. The evolution of the storm will impact your potential for near to slightly below normal temperatures for the end of October and early November. Right now, I like the idea of wave heights running 2 to 4 feet above normal. Right now, at the height of this storm. Definitely, I'm expecting definitely at the very least small craft warnings, possibly storm warnings. I would not be surprised if we see some gale warnings show up as well in this setup, based on what we're seeing with the forecast. Anything new on X or? Uh-oh. Holy smokes! Nervous Phillies fan here. Oh, hey, at least you're not a Mets fan. Yeah. Coastal flooding looks like major concern this weekend. Agreed. The potential impacts warrant concerns, but your caveat of the storm being shifted east is a good one. Thank you. What worries me the most is the coastal flooding. 8 to 12 foot waves and 2 to 3 foot surge on top of already high lunar tides is going to be a big problem. Parts of the Jersey Shore already took a beating. Agreed. Um, from Aaron, if the forecast verifies, I think we are taking January 2024 magnitude flooding. It's on the table. Unfortunately, oh, there's more. There's more. What? There's more. Oh my God. Is Sunday going to be okay for Philly? No. I mean, it's going to be damp.
It would be dead by now.
Why?
Well, that's what I said. Like, your life depends on it.
Well, unfortunately, I sense someone's got a wedding outside.
That's what my thought was.
Yep, yep, yep. See,
So I
when we were
wish
getting married in October,
we knew the
the
weather was going to be bad.
yeah, the wedding planner was like, "Oh, we could do things outdoors." And I looked at her dead. I'm like, "I'm a meteorologist. There's no way in heck we're planning for anything outdoors in late October."
I would have
That's
loved to do something outdoors, but I also knew it was October, and there's no
right.
way the weather was going to be cooperative.
So, see, the whole thing is that a meteorologist planning a wedding outdoors in October is just begging for a nor'easter and
Yeah,
it's waves of heavy rainfall. What
I
else?
wouldn't be here. As usual, Facebook is messing with me.
Of course. Some really great questions on
Facebook more than I
YouTube.
need it, I think.
Oh, well, while you're doing that, let me answer this question. Do you expect the strongest sustained winds and wind gusts to the south of I-95 corridor, or will they be more widespread? There will be widespread 10 to 20 mile per hour winds, but the strongest winds are going to be on the immediate coast. I'm concerned about basically south shore of Long Island and everyone from Monmouth County on southward through Cape May County for some very strong winds and likely power outages and major coastal flooding and gusts over 40 miles per hour, possibly over 50 miles per hour. Let's see here. What makes it cold core? Okay. So we talk about warm core, cold core, hybrid, subtropical. It's all about the structure. It's the type of engine that we're talking about here. When you have a warm core, it's the same air mass, right? It's all warm and it's vertically stacked, right? Because what's happening is that you're having warm air at the surface, right, being lifted at the surface or low, and as it's lifted, it's condensing, and that evaporation and cooling gets expelled out. So you basically have an engine like this, right? And it's all driven by the very warm waters, in this case for a hurricane, or the very impressive thermal gradient, like what you see with lake effect snow, driving the component of air rising and then sinking away from the low pressure system. That is warm core. Cold core is it's a bit of a misnomer. It really is should be just called extratropical, but cold core because the process at the core is really the clash between cold and warm air. So when you have a cold core system, you have cold dry air coming in from the backside, warm air trying to move over it, right? And so you kind of get this movement in the atmosphere like this. And so when the warm air is pushing over the cold air, it's lifting the moisture up, and as it's lifting the moisture up, it produces heavy precipitation here. That's a different type of engine. Now, let's talk about subtropical. You have the warm core, right, in place, and it's surrounded by the cold core structure. So you still have cold air coming in behind the warm core, but it's protected and kind of isolated, and it helps to enhance the whole process of the rest of the cold core structure within the warm core. So it's kind of like a donut, right? And then eventually, what you get is like this warm seclusion because eventually the process of the baryclinic structure overwhelms the warm core structure, the tropical structure, and that's where you get that's the basics, okay? That's the basic. If we were getting into technical, I would break out some equations and we get the charts, but we only have another 10 minutes, and that's a whole class, in some cases, a whole month worth of classes. But basically, that's the difference. Think of it as two different types of engines funneling the lifting process to balance the atmosphere. I hope I answered that well. Uh, Probably significant coastal. Yes, there's definitely going to be significant coastal erosion. I'm very much convinced of that. And the thing that we're going to have to really watch out for is people not taking this seriously on Sunday night and the Monday morning, and that could cause some car accidents. I'm worried about the morning rush hour. This is going to be a very heavy rainfall event, that is for sure. Uh, if it has a front attached to the storm, it can't be tropical, correct? Um, it could be. That's true most of the time. I'd say 99% of the time. Sometimes you'll have a warm core structure with a frontal system starting to develop. So I can't say yes every time, but most of the time, yes. In the modeling, it does show that the front dissipates, which could become subtropical storm or tropical. Most likely subtropical if it becomes anything. And I don't think it's going to remain that way very long because I think the upper level low basically overwhelms the entire structure of this storm. And the way that you could tell that it transitions to cold core is this. If the upper level low settles over the surface low on your map, and the surface low begins to weaken, that means it's a cold core structure. Because cold core systems are vertically slanted. And they're vertically slanted because it allows for the air to rise and it keeps that clash of the warmer and colder air continuing all the way up into the upper levels. And then you have your divergence and diffluence. In a warm core low, the structure is vertically stacked. So the low wouldn't weaken. The only thing that would weaken the low is actually it becoming slanted one way or the other. And because the reason why is because in a warm core low, your circulation has to be constantly rising until it's expelled out into the upper levels of the atmosphere. So if you have any disruption of that rotation of that circulation, then the low starts to weaken. So when you're looking at the model guidance and you see that the storm becomes vertically stacked and starts to weaken rapidly, that's a sign that it was a cold core system. Let's see, what else do we have here? Uh, Answered a lot of good questions. Are we good with X? All right. Well, you guys did get some great job asking a lot of great questions. I'm really impressed. As always, you guys are awesome. So let me go take a look and see if we have any more data that's coming out or any observations that really stand out. And if not, then we'll call it a night. Let me go refresh the water vapor satellite picture. In fact, here, you know what? I'm going to see if I can get a different look. Give me a second here. So there it is. Let's see if we can get full disk. Okay, very nice. All right, let me pull this up. Okay, so there it is. That's one vigorous upper level low right there. That's it. So now we no longer have to wonder if this is going to be a strong system. That's packing a lot of punch. Look at that vigor. Look at that. Look how it's wrapping in. Very impressive. And look at it lifting out ahead of it, lifting that moisture in Canada. Very impressive. And you could also tell if an upper level low is strong when you see sinking air like this showing up. That means you have a lot of rising and sinking motion in the atmosphere. This little this little guy is packing a whole lot of dynamite. Okay? So when we're watching to seeing, hey, could this be a significant storm? Yeah, that right. That infant has a lot of punch already. Now, again, why does this pattern support or produce a lot of volatility? This feature right here. I will note that this is taking longer to push into the West Coast than what was shown in the model guides a couple days ago, 3 days ago. It's taking sweet time pushing in towards the West Coast, which is allowing for this to have the opportunity to dive in, interact, and pull the storm north and west rather than just kicked right out into the Atlantic. So we can learn a lot on the water vapor just by studying this whole environment here. But what stands out to me the most is that feature right there. It's so beautiful. Um, does let's see here. Any other questions while I'm diving in? No. Okay, good. So this whole setup here is something that I think is going to produce a pretty good amount of rainfall for us. Um, it's just a matter of figuring out the timing of, or is that shortwave right there? So what did we learn tonight? We learned that in terms of the observations, yeah, this shortwave means business. It packs a lot of punch, and it's going to be capable of producing a powder keg of a storm. Okay, we know that based on the observations of the water vapor satellite picture. We know what we have to watch out for any adjustments to the east, which is whether or not this upper level low dives into around Michigan. Okay, if it does so on Saturday morning, game on. If it's delayed, then this is going to get pushed east. If it's too fast, then this is going to get pushed east. So, is there a chance you could see a miss? That's still an option, but that window is closing rapidly. If everything pans out as what we're seeing with all the guidance right now, we're looking at a very impressive heavy rainfall event on the immediate coast here, possibly pushing over 2 inches. I've seen some model guidance push as high as 6 inches in rainfall, but I think that's a bit too aggressive. But I'm just kind of letting you know that option is out there, but I think that's a little bit much. But just putting it out there. Okay. There is certainly a lot of potential here for very strong winds, wind gusts over 50 miles per hour on the coastal plain. There will be a high threat for power outages, uh, wind damage, down trees, especially all these leaves hanging around. Um, Very impressive urban flooding will be a threat with the heavy rainfall. And of course, I've already mentioned the coastal flooding. The worst impacts are likely to be Sunday afternoon through Monday morning, and then lingering impacts as we move into Monday afternoon and Tuesday. I think that pretty much wraps up the whole setup. Um, with that, I plan on continuing to have coverage on this event. We'll keep an eye out. I will put out an email on whether or not I'm going to be doing live coverage on Sunday for this event, um, and also continue to have updates as we go on through the rest of the weekend. Into the weekend, I'm sure the premium public video discussion will also have a lot of data in there as well, and we'll probably put out a public impact map by the time we get to probably either Thursday evening or Friday morning, depending on what I'm seeing with the guidance. That is your live chat for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. As we get closer, we'll get ready to launch the winter forecast. In the meantime, if I can just get this, there it is. Stay safe out there.